Hey everyone, how's it going? Can you all hear me? I think the mic is working now. Thank you all for joining us on this Wednesday. I see some familiar faces here in the chat. As I mentioned before, I'll be looking at the chat periodically, so feel free to say hi, ask your questions, and this is our intermediate class or stream. Classically, this is where Amir does his Twitch stream. He covers a lot of interesting, cool technique that we probably can't go over in a beginner class or in the office hour. But we're going to have the office hour next Tuesday, so come with your question, and we'll be happy to try and figure them out with you. And while we're waiting for any questions, we'll be making a lens together. So if you've ever wanted to see something happen in the lens or ask us how you can make your own lens, go ahead and join us next Tuesday and we'll work through it together. And we had this last week, but the following week after that office hour, we're going to have our beginner live stream. And so that one will go over some of the basic templates. So if you're new to Lens Studio, it'd be a great opportunity to learn some of the basics. And in this stream, we're just going to try and have fun and see what are things you can do when you make lenses and some techniques that you may not realize that you could do, or even if you do, maybe you'll learn some new things or hang out in the comments and you can help others who are learning. Um, but yeah, as with any stream though, like we're here, I'm reading your comments, so ask us anything and I'll be happy to answer them. Um, don't be shy. We can make the lens however we want it to be. So this is what's fun about live, right? And then hopefully next class we'll have Amir back on. He's working on some really cool stuff, so I'm covering for him today. And with that, we'll get started. First of all, though, before we get to the lens studio part, I want to show this really cool, amazing new website that we've just launched. Um, Mostly because I love looking at it. Like the video on top is just really amazing. It really shows you the power of what lenses can do. So all of these things that you see in the front are actually lenses that it's already out on Snapchat, made by the community that you can play with. So if you scroll down here, there's a couple of the snap codes. So feel free to try it out. I really love this one because it's a really cool use of a face. Um, and so, yeah, it's just a nice refresh about some of the things that we can do. And if you're new to Lens Studio, we can do custom shaders. And we'll take a look a little bit about that today in our stream. We're going to dive a little bit. We're going to go dive into some scripting as well. You don't have to script when you're using Lens Studio, but it really unlocks a lot. And we'll kind of go through that in today's stream. We'll start without scripting, and then we'll add scripting and see how they can impact with the lens you're making. And yeah, we're gonna try to cover a lot of these. In the next stream, maybe not this one, we'll cover some of the tracking that we can do. So in this case, you see land markers where there are places all around the world. And there's a few new ones actually. And I'll jump into that in a second. But there's these landmarks around the world that you can augment, and it'll actually know where you're looking into the building. So in this case, you can see that the lens is directly applied to the building. And of course, if you use spectacles, we have some really amazing ways to use the depth from the two cameras to make your lens even more engaging. Like you can see here, it understands where the ground is. Um, but yeah, before we dive in, let me just go into this in case you didn't know. There's a landmarker section, and inside the landmarker section of the template section of Lens Studio, there's actually a download page. And so Lens Studio comes with 5 landmarkers, but you can download a lot more. And we've just added a couple new ones, so feel free to dive in here. There's Gateway of India, and Great Sphinx of Giza in Egypt, and there's just all around the world, Prague Astronomical Clock, and so forth. So feel free to dive in there. Giuliette's Balcony and Verona, Italy, So there's a lot of fun to be had here. Um, and then I'll take a look at the comments just to make sure that I didn't miss anything. And then we'll get started. I'm gonna minimize that for now. Hey everyone. Um, yes, Loki, the best way to learn is to practice. So I hope you're all practicing Lens Studio. I'm super excited. And if you post on our forum, we check it out all the time. So please let us know when you make a cool lens. We'd love to check it out. And I'm gonna keep plugging this because it's one of my favorite resource. If you go back to the Lens Studio site and you go into the forums, there's a couple places here that I really like. So one, there is the share your creation. So if you make a lens, please let us know. We're super interested in what you're making. And the other things here is you can see the general section where you can see previous intermediate class, like this type of stream and all the projects that we've made, right? So in the previous one, we covered growing horn shader. Um, and then you can see our class schedule for the next stream we're gonna do. So please use this amazing resource. Oh, and also you can download example projects. So if there's something that you see here that you like, you can download it and make your own lens immediately. Awesome. Let's dive in. And I prepared some project assets for me to use today. Not all of these, but it'll help us to make the stream go a bit smoother. And specifically, what I want to show, whoops, is the star. A couple streams now, a lot of people have been asking, how can I make dust in Lens Studio or in my lens? And so one way to do that is to use particle system. So I just made the star really quickly. You know, I took a box and then carved out the corner. So it's not the most amazing dust, but feel free to make your own. And I'll kind of show you how this image can help us make a dust effect. So we'll start with that just to answer the question that we often get. So what I just did right there is I dragged the star into the resources panel, and now I have the star in Lens Studio. And you know, one thing you can always do when you have 2D image, you can create a screen image and drag in the picture. And so this is our picture. Think of this as a tiny dust speck, right? But the thing with dust speck and what makes them cool is that they're quite small, so you don't really know what they are, and that's kind of why I made a star. It doesn't really matter. And I'm gonna just have it show in and show up every now and then, and kind of randomly, and that makes it kind of like, you know, random and dusty. Um, and so instead of showing the whole image, I'm gonna go ahead and delete that image. Um, I'm gonna use the particle system. So if I add particles here, so I'm going to add particles. Um, you can see that our particle is here, but we don't see it in our scene. And the reason for that is right in front of the camera. And so I'm gonna move it back and you'll see, oh, it's still not showing up. And the reason is if you look at this orthographic camera, there is a layers list. So and you can make this a bit easier by pressing this I and seeing layer. And now you can see these different colored dots, and you can see that this orthographic camera has a green dot, which if you click on it, is the orthographic camera. But this particle is a blue dot, which means it's being rendered by the camera over here. And so all I have to do is switch this to the orthographic camera, and now you can see that the particle now shows up. And the reason I want to, for this case, to put the particles in the orthographic camera is because I want the dust to be on the screen. And so I don't really care about the perspective that you might see on dust that are farther away or closer. So I'm gonna, for now, just leave it here in the orthographic camera. And so next, what I'm gonna do is apply our star to this particle. So I can go ahead and right click here and press select to open up the material that this particle is made out of. And you can see that there's a lot of different options to change how this particle looks. So right now it's just a fountain type effect. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this particle texture. Oops, that is the original particle texture. I want my star to be the particle texture. And now you can see that my stars are spawning out of the center. And what I want to do, instead of it spawning just from the center, I want it to be all over the screen. And so what we can do is enable a spawn location or shape. And so if I make the spawn box now 10 units wide, you can see it's a bigger place where the particles spawn from. So I'm going to go make it 10 out of 10. And in this case, there is a z depth to the particles, but we don't really need that because we're using the orthographic camera. So I'm just going to make this a bit bigger. Awesome. So now our particle is all over the screen. We're getting closer to a dust type feeling. But dust don't maybe necessarily move, so I'm going to go ahead and set our velocity all to 0. And now you can see all the dust just spawns in the screen. And then what I'm going to do now is go ahead and stop it from rotating. So again, I can 0 these out. Perfect. And now I want to not have the dust disappear on time. So I'm going to go ahead and put 1, 1. So now you can see they're kind of little specks of dust. And I can make this even a bit more random. So I can say, different size particles here, right? And so we're starting to get the feeling of things moving around. And maybe let's make this a bit faster so it kind of like flickers in and out. A bit more dusty feeling here. Let's make it a bit smaller. And so when you make a lens, you'll often do this. You'll just play around. I didn't come in here with a strong idea of what I was going to do with this lens. Let's turn off Size Random here. So I'm just gonna make these smaller so that so it kind of pops in and out here. And I'm gonna make the size drag 0 so that it doesn't really change. And then right now you can see the dust kind of part fading away. I'm gonna remove that by making the alpha the end of the particle 1. So now you can see they're kind of popping in and out rather than fading away. And so what I'm gonna do here is, change the level of dust. And so that kind of gets us somewhere. It'd be a bit better maybe if you use your own particles or different particles. And when you're making particle system, you kind of want to play around with that. And the next thing I want to do is make it a bit more random. So you can kind of see that these particles are spawning at the same place, which means over time, the user will start to feel like, oh, this is kind of repetitive. Maybe it's just an image. It doesn't feel dynamic. What you can do is with this external seed, you can scrub and you can see that I'm now changing where the dust is placed. And you can see that there's kind of an effect to that. It makes the lens feel a bit more dynamic. It feels more glittery, it feels more fun, and it feels more alive. And that's kind of what you want to do with augmented reality and lenses. You want it to come alive. Is it possible for the stream to be at a higher resolution? It's a bit difficult to see all the text in UI. Let me know if I'm missing specific things. So I'm going to try to see if I can zoom in here with my Mac. But it doesn't seem, let me see here. Open display preferences. And we'll try this together. Let's try here. Does that help a little bit? I hope it does. And if not, it seems like it's still a bit small. This is a great question. We'll try to tweak this in the next stream. But for now, let's go back to how it was before, since it makes the window just in the corner. So I'll take a look at that after this stream. Thanks for the comment. This is all really great input, by the way. We would love to know how we can make this better and better. So just let us know how we can make it a better experience for you. And so this is great because I'm scrubbing it and you can see it's more dynamic, but in a real lens, you can't really do that because you can't be on someone's phone and scrubbing it for them, right? And so what we want to do is do this dynamically. And so what we're going to do is add a script. It's going to be a pretty simple script. So I'm going to open a script, and we've done this several times before, but the first thing we want to do is kind of get our material, the thing that we want to affect. So if you type anything, you can see that it starts to give us a little bit info of what you want to do. And actually, in the latest Lens Studio, you can even add new input. So I'm going to press that button, add new input. And this is a material. We want to change the material. So I'm going to go ahead and select the material option there and give it a name, dust material. And then I just need to use the script on an object. So I'm going to create an object here, and I put it in there. And I'm going to call it like my dust controller, maybe. Something like that. I'm going to go ahead and save this. And I'm going to remove some of this other text. Oops, just to clean things up. Whoa. I apologize. I'm going to go ahead and save it. And now you can see we've updated. We have this dust material. So I'm going to go ahead and put our material here. And we'll just even call this dust to keep it cleaner. So now to access what we've inputted, we can just say script dot the name that we put in. So in this case, script dot dust material. And I can select, you can see that there's this material and there's a pass. This is pass 0. So you can quick shorthand that by saying main pass, the first pass of the material. And I can say, what part of this do I want to change? There's like, and it gives you some additional information. You can do color mask, color mode, etc. And the secret here is if you look at the inspector and you hover over a section and you hold on, you can see there's a pop-up. And this pop-up will say, hey, this property is called external seed, and this control randomizes the look of your particle system. Valid range is 0 to 1. Okay, that's what I want to do. So now I just type in external seed. And I can, for testing, just set it to 0, right? And you can see that's one place. And if I set it to 1, oops, this will be another place. And I can set it to 6, and it'll be another place, and so forth. Okay, so what we want to do is for this lens to change over time. So we're going to do a quick event binding. So script.create event. We want this to happen on update event. So I'm going to type in, so every frame we want this to happen, right? So triggered every frame. And I'm going to do dot bind my function. So this means happens every frame. So I'm going to go print frame just for visibility. Now you can see that every frame it is showing a new text that says frame. And what we want to do is change this external seed every frame. So I'm going to go ahead and type that in. And then what we can do is give it our frame. And so every update, it will change depending on the frame. So we'll do a count here. Frame counter equals 0. And then I'll do frame counter plus plus. And then I'm going to do frame counter. Awesome. And see whether our dust changes. So it looks like our dust is actually not changing. Let's take a look why that might be. And so, you know, we're doing this live, so you kind of see like where I'm coding with you. I'm doing this in real time with you. Let's take a look at what the issue is with our lens. So we can refresh here, and we can see that nothing's happening. But if I just first want to make sure that the update event is happening. So I'm going to go press type X, and it looks like every frame X is being called. So this is being called. But maybe we're getting our external seed number wrong. So I'm going to scrub this again. Give me 1 second. I'm going to go back here to this dust material. So you can see that I'm scrubbing here. It's changing it. And then when I enable this script, you can see that if I change that material again, it doesn't do the same thing. And that's because our update event is handling it for us. But actually, now that we think about it, one thing that we miss is that the external seed set is between a value of 0 to 1. So one thing you can do is print frame counter, and you'll see that's way more than 1, right? So what I want to do next is let's use the sine function. And that what this allows us to do is that it will make sure that it's between 0 and 1. And I'm just going to print out this external seed so we can see the result, right? And you can see that it's changing the numbers, and it's going crazy because it's changing every frame. Well, we don't want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to do it every 4 frames. So we're going to use the same frame counter and say, you know, I want it to do every frame. So we'll say do every frame. If I want to do every 4 frame, and then I can go ahead and say current frame. So then what I want to do is, well, actually, you know what? We can use frame counter here. And what we can do is if our frame counter is percentage point equal 0, and what this means is that if I divide by do every frame, is my remainder equal to 0, then I want it to run here. So I'm going to press save. And then to make it a bit easier to see, I'm going to set this to a higher number. So you can see that it changes only every 10th frame. So let me just print this to make it a bit more understandable. So if I go print do every frame, you can see that, by the way, pro tip, if you go into video, I can press pause and it will pause the logger. And you can see that it's going 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then 10 divided by 10 is 0. And so we're going back again to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I'm going to go ahead and set that to do every frame, set that to 4. And I can go ahead and hide this away. And I'm going to go press play. So now our dust changes every 4 frame. So I'm going to look over real quick in the live chat. Thanks for the tip, HSML. I'll take a look at that. I'll make sure to take a look at the OBS settings. And yeah, please use the Lens Studio support. We take a look at it all the time. So if you don't get to get your questions answered in the stream, I'll make sure to, or we'll make sure, the whole team will make sure that it gets answered in the future. So let's get back to this. We have our dust going. And then maybe let's take a look at material editor. So right now we have images as our dust and grain, but maybe what we want to do is use material to do that. One way we can go ahead and do that is like if I use a post effect here and I'm gonna do color correction. And what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna add a new one and call it graph post effect. And I'll use this material for the post effect. And you can see that there's this effect happening now. I can go ahead and color correction. I mostly want to do that so I can get this color correction component. And I can double click here and you can see, if I minimize this, that there is this graph that determines how it fluctuates. The color correction is going back and forth. But we don't need to do all that fancy stuff for now. So I'm just going to start off fresh. I'm going to delete all these things. And I'm going to link these two. And so what we're seeing here is we're using the screen texture. We're applying the coordinates of the screen to sample the texture, and we're outputting it. So This is so right now we're not changing anything. This is pretty simple. So what we can do is, again, like before, we wanted some randomness, just the way we want the dust to feel a bit random. You can add different random nodes. In this case, I'm going to use Voronoi. And I can go ahead and drag this noise into the UV coordinate. And you can see, wow, it becomes gray right now. But if I drag this screen UV core into the seed, you can see now that something is happening. What is happening is it's using the screen coordinate and feeding into the Voronoi noise in order to sample the coordinates at different places. So that's pretty cool. And so if I select this and set it to 300 here, you can see that it gets a bit more noisy, which is kind of what we want. But we don't necessarily want the image to be unreadable, right? We don't want it to seem undecipherable. So let me put it back 10 here. And so what we actually want to do is we don't actually want to just use Voronoi noise. We want to add it to our screen coordinate. So I'm going to go ahead and type in add here. So I'm going to click add. And I'm going to go ahead and add the noise instead, right? So I'm going to add seed. And now we're getting somewhere, right? It looks a bit different. We're offsetting the images, but it's a bit too strong. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply it out. So I'm going to click multiply here. Select this here, and then I can reduce the number effect. Now you can see that we're getting a bit closer. It's distorting the image, but not in too crazy of a way. But you're kind of seeing it's kind of shifted to one side, and it's because the Voronoi noise is going 0 to 1, right? And one way to do this is, let's say, if we just drag this noise into the final output, this is what the Voronoi noise looks like. It's going 0 black to 1, the white. And so what I can do is subtract it. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract. So I'm going to subtract 0.5. And you can't really tell the difference because the screen is only running 0 to 1. So we're going beyond that point. Or actually, I'm not even feeding it right now. So I'm going to go ahead and feed that in. And now you can see that there's more black because those numbers are now below 0. So it's only rendering up to 0. But you can see instead of 1, it's going to 0.5. It's never actually going to 1 into white. It's only going to gray. And now I'm going to go ahead and drag that texture sample in. So here's what we have. So you can see the person is now back in this around the center. I'm going to increase this noise a bit higher. And now you see that this is kind of a more interesting effect, right? You're starting to see the noise as if there was like a glass that distorting the image. And so what I can do next is, one of the issue here is that it still feels a bit staticky. Unlike the dust, doesn't feel alive because it's just there, right? And I can even, let's choose someone more dynamic. Let's do an open mouth here. And so what we can do is it looks like the Voronoi noise has an offset parameter. And you can press this I, it tells you control cell movement. It actually says, if we look a bit closer, if it's connected to a changing value like time elapsed, it'll cause the cell to smoothly move around. And so let's do that. So let's type in time. And I have time now. And I can drag this into the offset. Nothing's happening because time is pretty slow. It's adding 1 second at a time. So I'm going to multiply this by 100. And now you can see it starts to come alive. It feels a bit more dusty, right? And then but the image, like I said before, is a bit undecipherable, and that's not great. You want your lens to feel like the real image is coming through so that I as a user, is still conveying what I want the world to see. Right now, it may be unclear that this is a person's face, or if like I'm using a world lens, it's a bit unclear what's going on here, right? Because it just looks like a bunch of dots, the general colors of green and blue, but you don't really know what's going on. And we can change the multiplier, of course. We can set it to 1, and you can see it starts to be more visible, almost not visible, and then like crazy. But the other way we can do this is mix. And so what mix does is it takes two parameters, A and B, and it will use one or the other on each pixel depending on the ratio. And so I'm going to use this mix. So I can drag this mix, and if you press shift, it will connect it into the closest line. So now I have this mix. It's mixing my texture with a white image. So you can see the image, it's kind of feeling a bit more white, because if you look at the ratio, and we'll set this to one parameter, it's 0.5. So when I go 1, it will choose everything in B, which is the white texture. If I choose 0, it'll choose everything in A, which is our dusty texture. And so what I can do here is let's make another texture sample. So I'm going to copy and paste. So here's another texture sample. And what we want to do is this time, rather than modifying it with the noise to make it dusty, we'll take the original image. So I'm going to, again, take the UV coordinates and sample the texture. And then I'm going to go ahead and plug that into B. And now if I go 1, you can see it's just taking everything in B. And if I take 0, it'll take everything in A. And then we can set it to 0.5. Awesome. So now you can see, like, you still can see the image, but there's a bit of grain around it. And that makes it a bit more, feel a bit matchy with the dust, right? It feels grainy, and it feels like it's alive. It's happening dynamically as you are recording. And then just for fun, we can add some color correction here. I'll add sepia, and now it feels a bit more old-timey, and I can go ahead and reduce that a little bit so that the real footage comes through. So we can try this on different footage. It's always useful to try on different footage, because in the real world, people might not use the images that you're looking at. So that's why we have all these preview image tests, like what would happen if there's 2 people. And then there's also like different simulations that you want to do to make sure that your lens looks great on all the devices that people might be using. So even, especially if you're working with Snap Camera, you can go ahead and choose desktop here. So I'm going to go ahead and choose iPhone X. Reading here into the comment, unfortunately, this is not recorded. This is happening in real time. However, we will put the projects up online for you to take a look at. And this one will likely be shared on our YouTube, so don't forget to subscribe. I guess it's down below here. And that way you'll get notified on the next stream. And also you can see when we upload new guides and tutorials on how to do really interesting stuff. One thing that I'll say here is, maybe I don't like how far these dust is going. And so what I can do is, earlier we know that if we change this number, it gets a bit more closer, right? So this is effectively changing how far to shift the pixels. So basically what we're doing is, let's say we have this coordinate, which like 0.5 and 0.5. We want to move it to the left, to the right, or up and down, like you want to shift it. And that's what this noise allows us to do. As we remember, it goes 0 to 1. And so we subtract it, 0.5, so that we're shifting both left and right, or up and down. And then we're adding it back to the UV cord. But for the most part, once you made this, you don't really need to mess with this, right? You don't want to actually make a mistake later and, oh no, I broke something, what do I do? And so what you can do is use a parameter node. So I'm going to go ahead and use the float parameter, and I'm going to go ahead and drag that into our multiply. And what that allows us to do, if we now select our material again, it says there's a custom flow here. Let's just give it a name. Let's call it offset distance. And if I set it to 1, offset distance is really insane. Set it to 0.1, it's how it was. And then if I go 0.01, it's a bit closer. So maybe that's a bit more closer to what I want. And so that gives us a good starting point for this kind of sepia and dust. And another thing that we can do, let's save this for now, call this dust. Something that usually happens when people have old time photograph, there's like a date on them. And this is where we get interesting parts too. So if we go back to our autograph camera, we can add a screen text. So this adds a text to the screen. And you can type in, today's Wednesday, but this lens will only work today. But if you click the dynamic text below, you can go ahead and select date and time. And now it shows what the current date and time is. And let's position that to the place where we want it. Right now we're seeing the material editor. Earlier we were playing the script editor, but let's go back to the scene. And this is our scene. And let's make the font a bit smaller. You may have seen some of the things that we're doing here in the last previous stream. And we can change this to a different font, maybe QDEF Mono, and then we'll set the color to orange, right? And I'm just gonna make this a bit smaller so we can rotate it. And now we have our date. Let's go ahead and put it to the side here. Let's put it in the center. And I'll give it some padding from the side. So we'll go a little bit here. The one thing to note here is that you don't want this date to overlap with the screen text or with the screen UI. So I can select the screen region above and I can say safe render. This will make sure that my lens does not overlap or cut out of the image. So that's pretty cool. Okay, the next thing we want to do is, this is pretty cool. It's giving us information about the date, but maybe what we want to do is use that data to change how our lens looks. And so what's really fun is that Lens Studio actually is just using JavaScript, right? So everything that's available in JavaScript is generally available in Lens Studio. So here I made a new script. And if I do JavaScript time, so current day equals new date. So this is just a regular JavaScript function, and I print current day. And then you can see that it is printing the current date, similar to what you see here. And current date actually, or the JavaScript date, has several functions that might be helpful. So if I say get day, it's going to give us a number. And this number is what day of the week it is. So if we go back to the screen text here, we can actually change this. So let's go back and change it to day. Same similar thing, get day. And it says Wednesday. But what if I want to do a custom version of that, right? So that would be way more fun and more interesting because it'll differentiate your lens and from other lenses. So this is useful when you're trying to make something cool really quickly, but you can take it to the next level using script. And what we want to do here is write our own custom days. So the JavaScript date starts with Sunday and goes all the way to Saturday. So I'm gonna make an array. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, whoopsie, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And so now if I say print the current day, so days, current date, current date dot get day, and you can see now it's printing Thursday. Actually, that's wrong. I missed Wednesday today. So you can see it prints Wednesday. So that's pretty cool. And what this allows you to do is write more custom stuff. So Thursday is actually, let's say, Friday Junior. And Friday is actually Happy Friday or Friday. And Wednesday is midweek. And so what I can do now is go ahead and instead of using day, I want to customize this text component. So as before, I can add input. So I'm going to click ahead and click my script, add input. I want it to be a component. Yeah, I want to modify the component text, and then I'll call it my date text. And then what I want to do is date text. Oops, date script dot date text. So access that thing dot text equals what I put in here. And then I just need to hook them up together. So this becomes screen text 0. And now you can say instead of that day, it says midweek. So does that make sense? It looks like my voice is too low. Let me see if I can bump it up. Can you hear me now? Let me know. I just increased the volume, but if it still has volume issues, let me know and I'll try to bump it a bit more. And here we're using the custom JavaScript date, but if we go back to our handy dandy Lens Studio website, we can go into the API and you can see that there's actually a lot more. So if I type in user context, you can do a lot of different things. So in this case, this is the same thing earlier as what we had. So if we look at the screen text and we can insert this different information. So if I go here, you can see it's the same. I can request display name, request birthday, and so forth. So one thing that I can do is, I can say request display name, and it tells me I'm using user context system. It inherits from script object. And if I go back, I can scroll to the bottom and it gives me information and examples. So I can go ahead and select one of these examples and then print this out. And you can see that it says hello Snap user. So this says Snap users because I'm building this in Lens Studio and Lens Studio's username is called Snap user. But if I push this to device, it will say my username. And so let's take a look at what an interesting lens we could do is. So I'm going to duplicate this and go back to the scene panel. I'll rotate this back to 0. And then here's my text. So I'm going to print it out so that's a bit easier for me to read. So I'm going to put it somewhere here. And then let's try a different font here. We have, maybe we do caveat. That's pretty cool. We'll do a white font here. And then for this one, let's put it back to that photography type thing where we go the date and time. But let's start modifying this my text, right? So this is called my date and time, and this is custom text. And then we'll call this text controller, and then we'll put custom text into text controller. And now you can see that it says midweek here. And then we'll go back to the script editor here, and then we'll say that when we now have the display name, we're going to say hello. So let's create a string to make it a bit easier. So first string equals hello display name, right? And then we can say my current date. So my story about my midweek, and then we'll just add that to the string. We'll concatenate it to the string. So now we say, string plus or equal. So we're adding hello display name, story about, blah, blah, blah. we're gonna then put the string here, and now you can say, hello Snap user, story about my wid week. So maybe what I want to do is, this is on this is Snap user on midweek. So that's pretty fun. And we can even add more text to help people know what is going on in our life, right? So we'll go ahead and duplicate the custom text. We'll put it right below. And this one, we'll just go ahead and insert some city, and then we'll add some temperature. And then we'll go make sure that it fits correctly. And so now our lens is tells a little bit more information, makes it a bit grainy, but it also gives people information about what's going on. This is Snap user, and today is midweek, and Santa Monica is at 69 degrees. So that's mostly what I have today. Would love to hear any questions that you may have. I think I'm gonna like it a bit better at the top here. So you should play around when you make lenses, and it's part of fun creative process. And as I mentioned before, you want to check around different device simulation, and that's kind of the reason we want to use the safe render here to make sure that it never flows out or hits some of the Snapchat UI. So we're gonna do that. Awesome. I'm gonna take a look here in the comments. Omlets, what's your question? And thanks for the confirmation, Othman. Hope that was pretty fun. And for extra credit, you know, what else you can do, by the way. Earlier you saw that we, let's name these so it's a bit easier to understand. So this is the dust controller, and this is our text controller, right? So when we did the dust controller, we modified some material. And so this is a pop quiz. We're gonna do the same thing for our dust here. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna combine what we learned in this last two scripts. So we're gonna do this dust controller, and we're gonna call it grain controller. We'll add grain controller here, and then we'll open grain controller. So grain material. So we'll name this grain controller, and we'll put the grain material here, which is our graph post effect. And if we look at graph post effect again, you can see that there is an offset distance. It's called property tweak n10. And I can actually modify that. So let's go back here. Tweak n10, we'll call it the same thing, offset distance. And then we'll go to our grain controller. And instead of external C, we're going to change offset distance. I'm going to have an issue at line 13 where we're accessing dust material instead of grain material. So we'll put grain material here. And you can see that it's changing as before. So that's pretty cool. But what we really want to do is maybe let's learn from our text controller here. We can have new date. So we're going to take new date again. So we're going to do var new date, and then print current day get hour. So this will tell me like I'm at hour 15, you know, it's 3 p.m. here. And so what maybe will happen is that, so I'll say var current hour is equal to get hour. And since hours don't change that much, we can actually remove the update portion. We'll do this once. Delete, make it a bit cleaner. And I'll set offset distance to be current hour. And so let's see, we can call var offset distance equals, and then we can print that offset distance. Oops, So offset distance. So it's 0.65, and then maybe we'll just divide by 10. And so what happens here is that depending on the hour of the day, the grain level will change. So that's really fun. Okay. Snapchat. So since we're mostly focused on Lens Studio today, what would be the best way to do this is to go on the Snapchat forum, to the Lens Studio forum, and then go ahead and ask your question there, and then we'll route it to the right place who can help you answer your question. How can you track a person's chest and place an image like a logo above it? So there's two kind of ways that you can go about doing that. We don't actually have chest tracking, but you can imagine if you have a face, you can put something on the chest. But there's also body tracking, and what that allows you to do is kind of track the body. So let's really quickly see that happen. So we're going to choose a person here, and what we can do is add new body. So object tracking and body tracking. And if I go back to the scene panel, you can see that there's this person, and I can move it down. And then we'll take a look at our scene panel here. And I'll just turn off all the other stuff to make it a bit easier for us to see what is going on. And there's also a body person here. So this is our image, and for some reason, this image is not showing. So let's take a look at why that might be. Am I using depth test? That is what is happening. So it was being rendered before all our other effects, so it was being hidden or covered away. But now you can see I can add an image there. So put back my dust controller here. Put my star here, and I can put a person, and you can see that's around the chest. Or I can, as before, I can go ahead and add a head binding here. So I can put this here. Actually, a faster way to do this is if you go add new, you want an image around the face, so I can go ahead and do that. And I can put the star. So now I have a star there. I can just bring it down here. So there are two easy ways to go ahead and track things closer to the chest. And finally, there's also a skeletal tracking, by the way. So if I add skeletal tracking, you can see that there's more points where you can place your object. Oops. The main difference here is that the person needs to be farther away because we're tracking their joint in order for this to work well. So just consider some of the trade-offs when you're using these different tracking. Do you want it to be more attached to the body, or do you want it to be more related to the face, and so forth? I'm gonna go ahead and delete these to keep projects clean, so for when we upload them afterward. And as always, we'll go ahead and clean up scripts. Put it here, and and so that's about it. That's what I have for today. We're coming up at the hour, so I hope that was a fun hour for you. It was certainly really fun for me. And put this in our textures, and we'll add a new material. It's always good to keep your projects clean, because next week when you open this, you're gonna be confused if you don't keep it clean. Or at least I get confused. But yeah, I really appreciate everyone hanging out with me. I hope that was you learned something. Let's take a look again at our creation here. So that's what we have. So I would love if you all join me next time, next Tuesday when we do office hours. So if you try this and you have questions about what you can do, definitely just let us know. Awesome. Well, thank you all. I will see you next time in the next stream.